Feliz, sería, hora by Randelion. Summary. It's been 8 years since the explosion that changed life as we knew it. 5 years since the disappearance of Greenville, Ohio. 4 years since a gangster sold out his only friends. 2 years since the rise of a military state. 1 year since Providence started training their secret weapon. And now, a revolution. Chapter 1. 8 years later. Part 1. Thumb, thumb, thumb. The rhythmic sound of a bouncing rubber ball reverberated throughout the steel walls of the dark and functionally empty cargo bay of the keep. An unpleasant sound that could be likened to someone striking the side of a dumpster with a baseball bat over and over again. Thumb. The ball was thrown with as much force as its owner trusted that the ball wouldn't do any cosmetic damage to the ship and that the noise wasn't bothering anyone. Except, perhaps, for the only other passenger in the bay who was startled awake from his nap by the sudden intensity that the ball was now being thrown with. Thumb? The young man, however, was glad he snuck the ball along with him, as the silence would have driven him crazy otherwise, though he was obviously restless without any real indication of their ETA to the target. Thumb. But then he thought it made no difference if he knew their current location, because it wasn't his place to know. It was more practical, more efficient, for him to be stationed in the most strategic location, Thumb, and that just happened to be locked up in the dark, alone save for his only companion, a chimpanzee, and the only possession to his name besides his goggles, and the other clothes on his person, Thumb. Providence made it clear he didn't need any more than that. Sure, it would have been nice to be treated with the same dignity and benefits that the agents above deck received, but Rex wasn't like the agents who handled things with the skill and professionalism of highly trained soldiers. Thumb? He was a weapon. THUM. Maybe you need to lay off the Saudi pop, Chief, Bobo joked, only for his signature fez to get knocked off. Rex didn't respond otherwise, prompting the chimpanzee, all too caring and entirely aware of Rex's desire to avoid conversation, to initiate a conversation after picking up his hat. "You feeling nervous about facing a level 1? He asked while scampering closer. "Why would I be? It's just a level 1. Smaller numbers mean scarier, remember?" Bobo tapped on his head twice. "Ah, right, like 6. Doesn't that seem backwards? Like, you'd think the bigger the threat, the bigger the number." He rationalized while spreading his arms to act as a visual aid. "I don't make the rules. I just repeat 'em whenever it makes me look good," Bobo explained with a sly grin. "Right now it's just making you look like a nerd." Rex's dig elicited a comically exaggerated frown from Bobo. "Ooh, you're getting good at that." "You think so? I guess the suits at the casino are a bit more discerning about my performance. I'm surprised anyone with common sense would let an eye patch-wearing monkey gamble. They only wise up when they catch me card counting." Rex snorted at that last comment, which Bobo took as a sign that his guard was lowered enough to try the question again. "Seriously, though, are you sure you're all right, kid?" Rex opened his mouth to speak before pouting slightly and sighing heavily, letting the ambiance of the cargo bay do all the talking. He had plenty to say, lots of grievances to raise, but deciding where to start and how to articulate his thoughts in a way that actually made sense was paralyzing, and if he got into it now, his mind might not fully be in the game. The keep is situated over the target. Street evacuations are complete. We have been cleared for descent. A Providence agent announced over the intercom. Finally. Saved by the bell. He'd vent to Bobo another time, because he was now thousands of feet above a situation in desperate need of intervention, and he was nothing if not a man of action. And so, letting his impatience and blatant disregard for procedure get the best of him, not that he actually resisted those impulses in the first place, he rested his hand against the ground and instructed the nanomachines inside his body to open the door. Glowing circuits of nanoscopic machinery extended from his palm into the various mechanisms of the keep, and within a fraction of a second, the hatch to the world below opened and revealed a grid of buildings and streets occasionally obscured by fast-moving clouds. "Race you to the bottom." With a smirk on his face and his goggles lowered over his eyes, he jumped from the ship without any hesitation and instinctively let out a cheer. "Woo-hoo!" Most people would be terrified at the prospect of free-falling towards the ground at a speed of 180 miles per hour, without so much as a parachute on their back. But Rex wasn't like most people. Like the monstrous aberration below him, he was an Evo too, but one with complete control over his nanites, the ability to tell them what to do. That meant he could do things like build giant mechanical gauntlets with nothing more than a thought and the assemblage of latent nanites in the environment around him, and when his metallic fist connected with one of the Evo's many faces, the force of the impact forced the Evo to the ground with a krakow, sending vehicles, lampposts, and other forms of debris flying across several city blocks in a massive cloud of dust. And when the cloud of dust settled, Rex triumphantly stepped forward and took off his goggles to get a better look at the Evo, who scowled at him as it struggled to pick itself up. Getting up, monster guy. Cool. I haven't had any fun yet. He taunted while cracking his knuckles. I'm Rex. Now thrill me. A few minutes was all it took for Rex to defeat and cure the former Evo, and have his abilities, or rather, his entire existence revealed to the world during a live broadcast of Ultimate Exposure. A fitting name, that. But the broadcast was of no significance to those outside of Providence, who would have the greatest influence on Rex's future partially due to the fact that one of those individuals was already there, lurking in the shadows of nearby rooftops, along with two of her closest allies. Although she and her companions had known about Rex's existence for months, with their leader having watched his every step during each of his field missions with Providence, the multi-armed young woman recalled this being the first time she laid eyes on him in person, even if it was from afar. And what a sight he is, she thought, while peering slightly closer over the edge. This was the one Van Cleis spoke so much about, Rex Salazar, the Machine King. He looked nothing like the little boy Van Cleis made him out to be. He was a young man, no older than herself by the looks of it, if not slightly younger, and one who had the height and build one would expect of a living weapon. Modestly tall, exceptionally built, remarkably powerful, and yet someone of his stature was still capable of such remarkable sympathy, she mused, while watching the naked man hug Rex for an extended period of time, completely oblivious of Rex's desire to be doing anything but. In her warped perspective, she had never seen anyone embody all these characteristics simultaneously, though his physique wasn't the only thing about his appearance she found so alluring. More than that, it was the way he walked, and the way he talked. Sure, she couldn't hear a single word he said from this distance, but she read his lips with the intensity of a hawk and took note of several observations. Among them was his propensity to smile and crack jokes that no one ever seemed to laugh at, and pout like a puppy when he was chastised, or nervous or terrified. She found it fascinating, for the lack of a better word, though adorable wasn't sufficient to convey the gravity of the pull these features had on her, and beautiful was too flowery a word to describe someone who carried himself with as much bravado as he did. The best way she could put it, if anyone cared enough about her opinion of him to ask in the first place, was that he shone most brilliantly in a world full of agonizingly dull people. At least, that was her initial impression of him, and she fully acknowledged the fact that these feelings amounted to nothing more than a burgeoning schoolgirl crush. All the same, she was interested in nurturing this blossoming crush of hers, but only if permitted the opportunity to do so, as she understood that whether or not she could entertain the silly fantasies that played in her mind depended on the approval of her leader. More accurately, she understood this the moment the jump jet carrying Rex and the other Providence agents took off, and the wolf-like Evo beside her began to speak. Let us tell Van Cleis what we saw. With no reason to stay in the area any longer, the young woman nodded in agreement and opened a red rift through space with a simple gesture of her larger hands. Once she and the others stepped through, the portal disappeared, and they kneeled before a sickly-looking man who was too busy tending to a garden to notice them. After continuing to kneel a few seconds longer and exchanging concerned looks, the wolf-like Evo cleared his throat and began to address their leader. Master, we have returned from our excursion. Beowulf, I didn't hear your arrival, he muttered before coughing twice and struggling to stand on his own. Beowulf leapt forward to help Van Cleis to his feet and whimpered at the sight of his complexion. "Oh, you look unwell, master. Breach will summon nourishment at once." "Down, Beowulf. You know that I haven't been responding well to anything for a while now. You haven't even attempted to feed today, have you? Breach, fetch one of the prisoners this instant." "Heel!" Van Cleis shouted with authority. Beowulf did as instructed and stepped away to stand beside the other two Evos. "Good boy," he said in a much softer tone. "I know you mean well, but we have more pressing matters to address. I trust you all had the opportunity to see Rex in action?" "Yes, master." "Yeah-huh." "We did." The Evos spoke in unison. "And? What are your thoughts?" Van Cleis prompted while leaning on a cane, fashioned from a vine he just summoned. "The boy shows promise, though his combat prowess leaves a lot to be desired." Beowulf huffed, speaking first as usual. He brought down an Evo several stories tall with a singular strike, but he is overconfident and struggled to cure that same Evo for minutes after the fact. "So he can truly cure Evos, then?" Van Cleis inquired. "I fear so, master. For months, there were murmurs and whispers amongst his inside agents at Providence that the organization had devised a cure to the exponential variegation that resulted in Evos. At first, Van Cleis dismissed it as a mere rumor, a fairy tale meant to inspire hope in a credulous world that desperately wanted Evos gone. But knowing what he did about Rex, being the first Evo of the modern era and all, he was less skeptical about the possibility. And now Beowulf confirmed with total certainty that it was true. "Ooh, fret not, Beowulf. We can make great use of this ability too." "And so, of course, master. What say you, Scalamander?" Van Cleis asked, while pointing his cane towards the crystalline lizard man. "Enades, if I'm being honest, I don't know if the kid's worth the effort. If you saw the way he handles himself, you'd know he's a loose cannon. One that's better aimed at Providence rather than ourselves." Van Cleis argued. "Fair enough, but I still don't trust him not to cure any one of us next." "Thank you for speaking earnestly," Van Cleis responded, genuinely appreciative of Scalamander's bluntness. "I've considered the possibility, and have yet to formulate a contingency, truth be told. For now, let us pray he believes in our cause. I don't think it'll be hard to convince him." Breach chimed without being prompted. "What was that, Breach?" "Nothing," she mumbled. "Nonsense. You've every right to speak your opinion as well. So, what is your impression of him? He seems bright. Or rather, nice." She clarified. "What exactly do you mean by nice?" "He likes to help people, and make jokes that don't seem to be very funny, and how are these traits relevant to our mission?" He squinted. "I feel like we could make a lot more allies with someone like him on our side. He's very likable." Van Cleis frowned. He didn't like the implication of her words, and the rising curiosity she expressed in him the past several days certainly didn't help. "So, do you like him, Breach?" "I wouldn't vouch for him if I didn't." She pouted defensively. Van Cleis wasn't satisfied with that response either, and with his concerns beginning to mount, he narrowed his question. "And in what way do you like him?" He impatiently tapped his cane against the ground. In what way am I allowed to?" she asked politely. With a heavy sigh, Van Cleis walked forward and looked her directly in the eyes. "It can't be helped if you fancy him, but under no circumstances should you fall for him so long as he sides with the enemy," he stated sternly. "I didn't mean it like... You know better than to lie to me, Breach. Don't let fleeting attraction interfere with the goals we seek to accomplish. All of our personal desires are secondary to the glory of our nation." He finished with his fist raised to his chest. "I understand," Breach practically mumbled, while bringing a smaller fist to her chest and looking off to the side. "I trust you do. So, if no one holds any lasting reservations against Rex joining us, let us see to recruiting him this evening." The trio's eyes widened in response to Van Cleis's demand. Did he misspeak? Surely he didn't mean to suggest they would bring him to Abesis the same day, they all thought. "Since no one else is going to say it this evening." Scalamander spat out in disbelief. "I hate to agree, but this seems too sudden, master." Van Cleis chuckled before coughing violently and addressing the group once more. "How astute! I am indeed making a desperate request of you three. but I know you're capable of carrying it out. The future of Abyssus? No. The fate of all evokind is contingent on you three bringing Rex home voluntarily, he added, before letting go of his cane, letting the roots sink between the cracks of the castle, and continuing to tend to his personal garden of herbs and roots. Breach's comments weren't entirely unfounded, Beowulf acknowledged internally. Although Rex forwent the opportunity to befriend 4 miscreants, it appeared he made friends with at least one person his age, and one who had some semblance of integrity about him. The company Rex chose to keep spoke volumes about his character, though it would take a lot more than that to earn his approval. Of course, the nature of this mission wasn't to warm up to Rex. It was to recruit him, and the unexpected presence of a human bystander earlier that day introduced an unfortunate wrinkle in their plan to approach Rex after he wound up playing hooky again, just as Van Cleis predicted he would. Is the blonde still there? What is he doing? What is he saying? What is he... Scalamander asked incessantly to an increasingly irritable Beowulf. Silence. If any significant developments occur, I will inform you both. Until then, keep a low profile and let me focus. Beowulf growled, the blinding light reflecting off the chimpanzee's handguns as he polished them was distracting enough already, so it was even more of a struggle to concentrate on Rex's conversation with Scalamander, constantly diverting his attention elsewhere. Breach, meanwhile, was pacing back and forth in place, watching Rex and his new friend talk and laugh, with a hint of longing on her face. She was tempted to teleport down there and casually introduce herself the way that stranger was apparently able to, or perhaps she would completely disregard Van Cleis's orders and send him to Abyssus without any regards to his feelings. If Rex couldn't be recruited as a friend or an ally, then he could be taken by force as a prisoner, and it would probably make no difference to Van Cleis's agenda. But as frustrated as she was, that idea didn't really sit well with her, for the most part anyways. Before she could dwell on the idea for too long, however, Beowulf's ears perked up, and he whined upon spotting the familiar silhouettes of Providence vehicles just on the horizon. "Jump jets are approaching. Take cover now," he instructed, causing all 3 members of the pack to scramble underneath an overhang, to be obscured by shadow as the agents descended and eventually zeroed in on Rex's location. They're gonna take him away. Scalamander huffed in frustration. No, Beowulf interjected, paying close attention to Rex's words, posture, and overall demeanor. Providence was indeed here for him, but it appeared he wasn't interested in returning with them. The boy is resisting. This is our chance. To do what? Take them all? Scalamander blurted out. We've never faced a group this large before. Breach panicked. We will keep the agents occupied while you do your part, he instructed Breach with a claw pointed at her chest. He must come voluntarily. How am I supposed to? Figure it out. Beowulf snarled before slashing open the fence and pointing once again, this time at Agent 6. Scalamander understood this unspoken command as instruction to fire and unloaded 2 jagged crystals to separate the green-suited agent from Rex. The move was effective, almost lethally so, with one of the projectiles clipping Agent 6's tie before piercing the ground. And with the 2 most dangerous Providence agents separated, Beowulf sprang into action, followed immediately by Scalamander, and then lastly by Breach, who hesitated for just a moment. After frantically dodging several clips worth of bullets, Breach leapt into the air and threw several portals at a group of Providence agents standing between her and Rex. The exhilaration of combat and anticipation of formally meeting Rex after all this time made her dizzy in a nauseating way. What would she say? What would he say? And why did she suddenly feel a sharp pain at the side of her head? Regarding her final question, she intuited that it was the swift heel of Rex's nanny that was responsible for sending her flying several feet off the side and into the pavement. Silently cursing the fact that the superior durability of most Evos didn't translate to a higher tolerance for pain, especially in regard to a kick that would have scrambled the brains of a typical person. Breach laid there for a moment to recuperate, while Beowulf continued his assault, and Scalamander blocked off Rex in an attempt to shield him and his allies from collateral damage. Noble as his intentions were, Rex clearly didn't see it that way, and extended a mighty machine-enhanced punch at Scalamander that threw him off balance. "Stay behind me. I'll handle the crystal croc," Rex assured Bobo and Noah. Scalamander thought that the speed at which Rex was able to build his machines was incredible, but had no interest in being acquainted with how it felt to be repeatedly pummeled by them. And so, he desperately raised his arms in surrender and attempted to reason with Rex. "Easy, kid. We're on your side." "My side? Last time I checked, none of you work for Providence," Rex countered, before sporting a stance to throw several more punches. Weary about tanking another serious hit, Scalamander braced his scales and intercepted one of Rex's smack hands the third time it connected, encasing it in a crystal pillar that immobilized his entire right arm. "Try Evokind. Providence wants to lock up or kill every last one of us in case you haven't heard. Only the dangerous ones like you," he shouted back, before activating the drill mode of his smack hands and continuing to box Scalamander. "And in case you haven't heard, I can cure them too," he threatened with a grin, before withdrawing his smack hands, closing the distance, and placing his hands on Scalamander. Oh no you don't," Scalamander barked, before grabbing Rex's jacket with his 3 smaller arms, spinning him around and tossing him into Bobo and Noah. The exertion of the maneuver, and the sheer panic at having almost been cured, caused Scalamander to pant profusely and lash out at Rex. "What's your problem? It's not like we're hurting anyone," Scalamander cried out before being interrupted by a Providence agent bouncing off a concrete wall and leaving behind a massive crack in the formation. "It's not like we're killing anyone," he clarified. "How thoughtful. Doesn't change the fact you attacked us first," he countered as blue streaks of nanites materialized on his hands in anticipation of the build. "You think Providence would let you go without a fight? They'll do anything to keep you under their control. We want to change that." Rex didn't have a quip prepared for that one. Of course, Providence was prepared to protect him at all costs. He was considered their most valuable asset for his ability to cure Evos and decommission them with minimal assistance. But that's all he was. An asset. A tool. A weapon. "Stop. Calm down, Rex. Keep it together," Rex told himself, as he struggled to build another pair of smack hands and held his head. "Can't have a repeat of this morning. You're better than that. We're better than that. 3 Evos is nothing Providence can't handle. Rex, we can help you if you let us," a mysterious voice cried out from behind him, causing his blood to turn cold and his perception of time to freeze in its tracks. With his neck being stiff as it was, all he could do in that split second was rotate his trunk and turn his eyes to see where that shrill voice came from, and he was surprised to see it came from a passionate young woman on the other side of a red portal. An Evo, it seemed, but the most human-looking one he's encountered yet, aside from her multiple arms and skin, as bleach-white as, well, his boss. But the peculiarities of her appearance were the last thing on his mind. In truth, he was more concerned with a series of several other questions, like, how did the stranger know his name? Why was she making such a proposition? And what was on the other side of the portal that she most likely opened? He didn't trust these Evos one bit, but his curiosity would have killed him if it wasn't satisfied. And if they were only interested in him, then perhaps it was worth tagging along to get some answers and end the skirmish before anyone sustained any permanent injuries. Whatever his intentions were, Agent 6 took notice of Breach's portal and took initiative by retrieving a cylindrical device from his coat pocket and activating it, causing the young woman to reel in pain and use her larger hands to pry the portal open before it caved in. "Phase Scrambler," Beowulf shouted as he swatted away another agent. "Scalamander, we leave now," he barked before blitzing towards the group at full speed, and with his arms extended wide, he tackled Scalamander, Rex, Bobo, and Noah through the portal and into Breach. In a panic, Agent 6 deactivated the Phase Scrambler and raced in pursuit of Beowulf, but he couldn't keep up with the Evo's tremendous speed and slammed his fist into the ground, when the portal closed right before him. Chapter 2. 8 years later, Eyes. Part 2. Elsewhere, in a crimson forest with a blood-red sky, several Evos and one human boy crashed into Breach at full force, and every one of them groaned in agony, with the exception of Beowulf, who managed to roll into his landing. "Pardon my approach." Beowulf apologized while kneeling. "Rest here while I fetch our master. We won't take long." With a huff, he planted his claws into the ground and sprinted to his master on all fours at a pharaoh velocity. "Like we got much choice." Bobo wheezed while slowly picking himself up. Rex, who was far more accustomed to taking blows and was already on his feet, helped Bobo up before extending a hand to his new friend Noah. "You good, dude?" "Ugh, I think I got a concussion. A werewolf just clotheslined me, dude." Noah groaned as Rex practically lifted him off the ground. "My doctor can take a look at you later. She's super nice and just as pretty. You'll love her," Rex assured Noah before patting him twice on the back and propping him against a nearby tree. Once he was handled, Rex set his sights on the young woman who drew his attention. He quickly assessed her appearance in the few seconds it took to approach her, a skill ingrained in him by Agent 6 during his many risk assessment training sessions at Providence, and a risk she did seem, having seemingly teleported them to who knows where, and sporting an extra pair of limbs about as large as his torso. Procedure would suggest he seize this opportunity and restrain her before she gets the chance to do anything else. But at that moment he chose not to, not out of rebellion against procedure, as usually would have been the case, but rather curiosity at meeting another humanoid Evo, and one who appeared to be around his age. In this circumstance he recalled the advice of Dr. Holliday, which was to always treat women with dignity and respect, and he would demonstrate these traits by helping her up as well, even if every rational bone in his body was screaming at him not to. "Hey, are you all right?" Rex asked while kneeling to her level and extending a hand. For some reason beyond her understanding, whether it was shyness or pride or some other third thing, she refused to take his hand, let alone look him in his dark chocolate-brown eyes, and stood up on her own, as did Scalamander a short distance away. Rex, conversely, backed up slowly to get in closer proximity of his allies, and once the opposing Evos were confidently standing on their feet, he began asking them questions. "So, what is this place, and who's your master?" Rex asked in a no-nonsense tone with his arms crossed. "This is the Promised Land," Breach responded with a greeting sort of pose. Scalamander liked this answer, thinking that they shouldn't divulge too much information before Beowulf and Van Kleis returned, and hoped that she would be able to stall them for as long as it took, as she was better at speaking between the both of them, even if her speech mannerisms were far more eccentric. "And our master is our employer and leader and ruler of this place," Breach elaborated while sashaying closer. "He will answer any questions you have." "That's great and all, but what if I just want to know where the bathroom is?" Bobo asked while wobbling up and down. "Look around," Scalamander grunted. The guys did as instructed and saw nothing but trees, bushes, and other signs of nature as far as the eye could see. Practical as Scalamander's suggestion was, Bobo wasn't too keen on the implication. "I'm housebroken," Bobo stressed. Scalamander side-eyed Breach, who sighed before stepping to the side and tossing a portal she struggled to open so that Scalamander and Bobo were teleported away. "I sent them to the castle. We will wait for Beowulf to return," she huffed, having no desire to create any more rifts after fighting against a phase scrambler and getting dogpiled by everyone. Fine by me. There's something I wanted to ask you anyway," Rex replied. "I already said. Just one question. I promise I won't tell," Rex insisted with a reassuring smile as he slowly approached her again. Breach pouted at his persistence. Van Kleis wouldn't like the sight of her fraternizing with the enemy, as he put it, and given how quickly Beowulf could travel on foot, she was certain they would be back any second. The smart thing to do would have been to brush him off or tell him off, but then she looked directly into his eyes and suddenly didn't feel so smart. He was easily taller than her by a foot, if not more, so she had to tilt her head up by several degrees to properly see his face. And rather than making her feel small, she felt on the same level as him when he looked back down at her. Even during her finer moments, people usually didn't bother to look at her mostly concealed face. But he did. And with a smile, too. A warm, luminous smile that made her want to reciprocate his approachability by humoring him and answering his question. Ooh, just one question. She specified with a finger pointing to the sky, and that response seemed to make his smile glow all the brighter. A moment ago, you said my name. Have I seen you before? Suddenly, Breach felt a cold chill at the possibility they had been spotted during one of their reconnaissance efforts. But the fear she felt at this possibility was replaced by an unknown feeling that was magnitudes worse when Rex drew even closer and gingerly brushed aside the strands of hair that covered her face, revealing tired, albeit wide-open eyes of a hue that was somewhere between a dull jade and polished sea glass. Illustration of Rex brushing aside Breach's hair, and Breach looking at him with a nervous expression. Rex might have been able to identify the exact color if he looked long enough, and there was a part of him that really wanted to a recess of his brain that was previously thought to have been lost, trying desperately to reconnect with his present stream of memories. "There's something familiar about your face," he explained while studying her eyes, nose and lips, with a level of concentration that sent her heart racing, and might well have caused it to burst through her chest were it not for Noah loudly clearing his throat and pulling Rex aside. "Excuse us for a moment, miss," Noah told Breach with a service worker's smile, before turning around and banging his forehead against Rex's. "Rex, what the hell are you doing?" he shouted. "What are you talking about?" The brushing aside a girl's hair maneuver. I applaud the initiative, but you can't just do that when you don't even know her name. There are rules to flirting. "Kewa, I wasn't. Rex broke away from Noah to give Breach an apologetic bow. "Sorry for being weird." Breach could only manage a squeak before Rex turned around to face Noah and make his case. "Like I was saying, I wasn't trying to flirt with her. I just thought I might have seen her face somewhere." "What face? I'm surprised you can see anything under those overgrown bangs." "Yeah, that's why I had to move her hair out of the way, dumbass." Rex continued to argue, much to the embarrassment of Breach, who was glad her hair concealed most of her face, with how red it was turning. Fortunately for her, she wouldn't have to endure such gut-wrenching embarrassment much longer, as Van Cleis and Beowulf had arrived. Mounting Beowulf, like a loyal steed, Van Cleis expertly rode the Evo with a trail of flowers, following behind them, along with every tree in their path, bending around him to form one long, continuous archway. The gaps between the branches resulted in streaks of light, which further framed his regal appearance. And though he was worryingly thin, and only slightly less pale than Breach, he sat upright with the dignity and prestige of royalty, which was only complemented by his waist-length hair, flowing elegantly in the wind like a fish down a river. "I guess that's their master. Act impressed," Noah suggested while bowing slightly. "You not acting," Rex confessed back before stepping forward and hailing the king with a casual wave. "I've never met an Evo who could control nature." In his year's worth of practical experience, he had encountered plants turned into Evos, and creatures whose Evo transformation caused them to resemble plants. But both types of Evos could only control their own bodies, and not the environment around them. So seeing this man who also looked somewhat familiar, despite Rex having never been briefed on him, or his appearance achieve such a feat, was a curious matter indeed. "I doubt any Evo is capable of such a thing," Van Cleis replied, before a spiral of roots hoisted him off of Beowulf, carried him to the ground, and weaved together into a makeshift cane. "My relationship with nature is, however, unique." He paused to smile warmly, and then formally introduced himself. "I am Van Cleis, and I welcome you both to Abyssus, sanctuary to all Evos." "Sanctuary? You'd think Providence would mention a place like this." Van Cleis's eyebrows scrunched together. That wasn't the response he was hoping for. "Considering how different our goals are, I'm only moderately surprised," Van Cleis mused. "We can discuss this and any other questions you may have over dinner. Breach, if you would." At his behest, Breach attempted to open up a portal to no avail. After a few seconds of trying and failing to create anything substantial, Van Kleis raised his hand as a signal for her to stop. "You'll have to forgive me. I have an unfortunate habit of pushing her past exertion. Let us walk to the castle instead." After tapping his cane against the ground twice, the entire forest floor around them moved forward like an auto walk at a speed that rivaled Beowulf's sprint, and despite their excellent pace, Van Kleis insisted on leisurely strolling along this moving path, and everyone followed suit. "So, your name is Breach?" Breach silently nodded at Rex's question. "That checks out. I'm Rex, but I guess you already knew that. She, Beowulf, and Scalamander are my most trusted advisors, and the ones who escorted you here," Van Kleis explained. "After watching you for some time, I've been hoping for the opportunity to meet. This is starting to sound like a cult. I'm ready to bail whenever you are," Noah whispered to Rex, and as much as he was inclined to agree, he wasn't about to leave without some of his most pressing questions being answered. "I'm sure you roll out the green carpet for all your guests, but I have a feeling this isn't the first time we've met." Beowulf held back at the urge to snarl at Rex's brazen remark. "As a matter of fact, it isn't," Van Kleis admitted. "We've both changed quite a bit since we last saw each other, but it seems you don't recognize me, Rex," he suggested, before turning the other way in a little experiment to determine Rex's candor. "Recognize you? I don't remember what I had for breakfast, let alone anything about my past." He shrugged. "Is that so? We have even more to discuss in that case." And upon seeing the forest clearing, he smiled before turning around and spreading his arms wide. "But first, why don't you feast your eyes on our glorious kingdom?" When the strip of land carrying the five of them emerged from the dense forest, they were greeted to the sight of tens upon thousands of Evos working fields, doing trade, playing games, giving tours, and living a calm, peaceful life in every conceivable way. Van Kleis couldn't help but be reminded of the center panel from the Garden of Earthly Delights every time he saw the view, and every time he did, he was reminded how it was the only place in the world that contested the narrative that surrounded Evos, and felt his desire to protect his paradise from the rest of the world rekindled. "There's so many Evos," Rex muttered with an awestruck look to his face, that Van Kleis, Beowulf, and Breach were very content with. "And a lot more humans than you'd expect there to be," Noah added with cautious admiration. "Evo or not, those who have been cast aside by their families, friends, and Providence are all welcomed here." Rex noticed from the corner of his eye that something about Van Kleis's statement caused Noah to look away. Most of the humans here are relatives of Evos who wanted to stay united with their families," he elaborated. "Though it isn't uncommon to find others who are sympathetic to our cause." Van Kleis's explanation was interrupted by a group of children riding several rhinoceros-looking Evos, frantically waving and hollering to get their attention. It's her, the portal lady! Hiya, Breach! La Bruja Blanca! Hi, Breach! Hey!" The children screamed and cheered. Breach gave the children a lazy wave of acknowledgement that sent them into a frenzy, all while looking the other direction, as she was too embarrassed to reveal so much as a hint of the prideful smile that formed on her face. "The White Witch," Rex repeated with a smug grin, causing Breach to retreat even further. One of many nicknames that the younger denizens have affectionately given Breach. Van Kleis beamed as the children began to ride away from the group, waving all the while. Seeing how she transported nearly all of them to this safe haven, it's only natural they would idolize her. If Beowulf is the sword and Scalamander is the shield, then she is undoubtedly the heart of this country. Rex let out an impressed whistle. "I can count the number of times I've been thanked for doing my job on one hand. I mean, I know how to count in binary. But still," he thought to himself, "it must feel nice being recognized as a hero." Rex complimented Breach with a gentle nudge from his elbow, and without a word, she gracefully stepped off the moving strip of land and quickly shrunk away from view, much to the chagrin of Van Kleis. "Don't mind her. She's just overwhelmed by all the attention," he explained with a tinge of disappointment to his voice. overwhelmed by all the attention she's been receiving from you, he further thought, making a mental note to discipline Breach for this transgression. But that would be a conversation for another time, he acknowledged, as the four who remained had finally arrived at the gates of Castle Abyssus and took their first steps into its grand halls. Beowulf, would you kindly take our other guest to the dining hall? Rex and I will be taking a slight detour before we join. Rex shot Noah a look of concern, but when Noah responded with a nod of understanding, he cast his worries aside and reluctantly followed Van Cleis. The hallways were as long as the ceilings were high, and the stonework of the floors and walls looked ancient and surprisingly unkempt for what otherwise seemed like a modern nation. For Van Cleis to debase himself by occupying such an estate meant that he was extraordinarily modest or dreadfully uninspired, Rex thought, until they entered the throne room, and he stopped in his tracks just to process all the ornamentation. Stained glass windows with figures that clearly depicted Van Cleis, corners, curtains, and bookshelves that were trimmed with the same gold alloy that adorned Van Cleis's gauntlet and uniform, intricate carvings of the nation's insignia etched into the tables, walls, and ceiling, and drapes that were more red than the finest rubies in the skies above. So much for modesty. Impressive, is it not? Van Cleis boasted as he approached his throne. 8 years ago on this very spot is where it all began, the so-called nanite event. After decades of research, the dream to create nanoscopic machines became real. Famine, disease, and inequality were all to become things of the past. And they would have been, had the project not been sabotaged by those who were too eager to see the fruits of their labor. Against the wishes of the wisest of their number, they inadvertently gave birth to a new age. And a violent birth it was. That was the day that everything changed. That was the day Evos came to be. Van Cleis sat down on his throne, pausing to catch his breath and wipe his brow. Your abilities are a testament to the wondrous properties of nanites, yet your providence sees it as a plague, something to be destroyed. It would be a different story entirely if all Evos were like you, me, and your people. You forget yourself. When I said this place accepted all Evos, I meant it. Even those who are unable to control their new forms are treated with the same dignity and respect as any other person, only restricted to whatever extent is necessary to ensure their own safety and that of others. To Rex's concern, Van Cleis paused to take several labored breaths before continuing. Yes, everyone has a place here, including you. Especially you. Van Cleis managed to croak the last 2 words before gritting his teeth, clutching his chest. Oh, whoa! Are you okay? Do you need me to get someone? Rex reached out. There's no need. I just need a moment to catch my breath is all. Van Cleis hissed before falling forwards and getting caught by Rex. I'm not buying it. Do you have a nurse or doctor around here? Anyone who can treat you. This isn't something that can be helped. The pain had become unbearable, and he could deny the cause no longer. His nanites had become unstable to the point of volatility, and they were seemingly determined to take down every last one of the cells in his body, along with them. And then his body went limp in Rex's arms, totally unresponsive to his commands. Nope, a stroke, perhaps. Van Cleis thought bitterly, as Rex shook his body and desperately looked around for any means of contracting help. It looked like he was shouting something with the hope that someone, anyone, would hear his cries. But no one did, Van Cleis included. And now my senses, Van Cleis lamented as his vision turned black, terrified that his mental faculties would be taken from him next. And then, a gentle breeze blew over the grassy fields of Abyssus as the sun peeked over the hills. It was the only time of day when a trace of blue could be found in the nanite-laden sky, and the resulting gradient painted a tapestry of colors that was worth waking up early in the morning to witness. But Van Cleis didn't get up before dawn just to appreciate the view. The nanites in his body vibrated in anticipation, and he wouldn't deny them their purpose. Although it appeared he merely raised his hand for the ground to quake and tremble, the truth was more involved. The nanites that permeated the soil were responsive to his will, but he had to dedicate all his energy and concentration into taking control of the trillions it took to clear the ground, redistribute the nutrients, and prepare the soil. It was a laborious process, but one that became easier with repetition. Given enough time, he believed he would become proficient enough to terraform entire biomes and promote biodiversity in the mostly arid badlands of Abesis. But whether he would be afforded the chance depended on how cooperative his nanites wanted to be, and if Beowulf continued to intrude on his efforts, as he was doing at that moment. His footsteps were stealthily light, but Van Kleis could recognize his trot from meters away. "What brings you here at this hour, Beowulf? I recall giving you the day off. I recall refusing. How could I possibly rest, knowing my master is prone to collapse at any moment?" Beowulf tossed a heavy cloth sack to Van Kleis, a sack which was summarily opened to reveal the body of some type of lagomorphic Evo, and a large warm one at that. "Oh, you shouldn't have," Van Kleis insisted with a falsetto tone. Beowulf, none too pleased by his master's stubbornness, simply growled until Van Kleis retrieved the Evo from the sack with a sigh and studied it for the best location to bite. After finding a suitable spot and willing his canines to sharpen and extend, he sunk his teeth into the Evo and drained it of its essence blood, fat, nanites and all. All that was left of it once he drew his head back and licked the blood off his lips was a contorted statue, which no longer resembled any sort of living creature. "Well?" Beowulf queried, to which Van Kleis rubbed his stomach in circles with a half-hearted hum. "Master, please," he whined, prompting Van Kleis to reach forward and pet his guard's head. If only he could live off good intentions. "Have you finished for the day? Surely you've done enough," Beowulf suggested. "I fear I don't do nearly enough." Van Kleis sighed. "Do you recall how many Evos have taken refuge here in the past 24 hours alone? At least 100, Master. And we can expect 100 more tomorrow and the day after that. Breach has been diligent, and Abesis is growing rapidly, Beowulf, as are the needs of its people. You should have these arrivals earn their stay." "Pardon? Why not have them prepare the ground and plant the crops? The toll this labor takes on you is far too great. Such peasantry is beneath a king. The only thing beneath me is the ground, Beowulf. How could I, in good conscience, ask them to prepare the soil when I know where the best soil lies? When I can till dozens of acres during the waking hours, where it would take them days to do the same, when they haven't had a moment's rest before coming here, and were promised relief for the first time in their new lives?" Beowulf stood in silence. "The risk of famine is real, and I will do everything in my power to prevent one." Van Kleis solemnly swore. Hunger can be such a terrible thing. Van Kleis's right arm shot towards Rex's neck and squeezed with a vice grip. Seconds prior, Rex attempted to cure Van Kleis, with the hope that doing so would mend whatever damage was caused by his transformation, just as the procedure did with every other Evo he cured. But there was something different about Van Kleis's nanites, something horribly, inextricably wrong. Not only was Rex unable to cure Van Kleis, but Van Kleis's nanites corrupted Rex's own before calcifying into lethal shrapnel and instructing their replacements to retreat to their new host's body. It was a parasitic interaction that was fundamental to Van Kleis's existence as an Evo. As much as he dreaded it, ran away from it, and made coping with it more dignified through contraptions such as his gauntlet, that insatiable hunger arrived all the same. And at times, such as then, it compelled his body to move even when he wasn't conscious, reaching for Rex's throat, readying his left hand. These involuntary movements were all driven by the subconscious desire to consume, to replenish his malnourished body. Gapa, and feed he would. The needles retracted from Van Kleis's gauntlet, and in one swift motion his claw plunged directly into Rex's abdomen at full force. The crackle of this nanite transfer could be heard all throughout the castle, and seen, too, in brilliant flashes of light, which drew the attention of everyone within its halls. It would take them a minute or two to get there, and by then Rex might have been reduced to a statue if Van Kleis didn't regain consciousness and summon every ounce of free will to withdraw his needles from Rex's body. Mentally, it was a Sisyphean task, but physically, despite the needles being comfortably nestled inches into Rex's flesh, the motion of withdrawing was remarkably easy, as was standing and breathing and curling his fingers into a triumphant fist. And it wasn't just his motor functions. He could now see with total clarity. He could hear the distant chirps of birds splashing in rivers miles away. He could smell the faintest hint of Agent 6's cologne that still lingered around Rex. And regarding taste, how could he even begin to describe the sensation? Because his nanites changed his physiology so drastically, the way he perceived textures and taste was drastically different from when he was human. Just coming into contact with other nanites was sufficient for his mind to conjure a flavor profile and feel. And so, after fasting for what felt like an eternity, it felt as though he feasted on an entire banquet and was dizzyingly drunk off the euphoria of his portion, even if it was only just a taste. But what a taste it was! For it to revitalize his vigor to an extent he couldn't dream was possible. He felt healthier, stronger, more powerful. He felt like a god. Rex, on the other hand, was feeling decidedly less hot with his vision blurred and his ears ringing, not to mention the pain in his abdomen from having 5 needles pierce his body, siphon his nanites, and rip back out again, just as his brain had numbed him to the pain. The only saving grace of that whole interaction was that the remnants of Van Kleiss's nanites formed stone-like scabs around the punctures. He wasn't bleeding out, at the very least, but with the amount of pain he felt at his core, he almost wished he was. "What are you? Some kind of vampire?" Rex spat out as he lay on the floor with his neck being massaged by one hand and his stomach being held by the other. If only there was so convenient a label. Rex was stunned at the timbre his voice now had, with it easily projecting down the halls despite him speaking casually. What's more, some color returned to his skin, as did plenty of muscle and fat on his frame. With a simple tilt of his head, several roots sprung from the ground and raised Rex in a woven chair so he could look Van Kleiss in the eye. And he looked remorseful. I am an Evo, one afflicted with a terrible hunger that can only be sated by active nanites. Yours was especially nourishing. But fret not, I am exploring alternative means of sustaining myself. Sustain this! Bobo shrieked before unloading all 12 rounds of his revolvers into Van Kleiss. Blam, 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 blam. Van Kleiss was so preoccupied with Rex that he failed to notice the sounds of a chimpanzee loading his guns as he ran towards the source of Rex's agonized scream. Bobo's aim was uncanny, as was the firepower of whatever bullets he was supplied with. Van Kleiss acknowledged, as his body was littered with 12 massive holes. But in truth, this attack didn't bother him as much as the subconscious impulses he felt resurfacing. Another involuntary motion, another desire to recuperate by feeding, and before him was convenient prey. If a bullet hadn't just blown off his jaw, he would have warned Rex to run. But the fear in the young man's eyes suggested that the warning was unnecessary. Then the suggestion became a guarantee when Rex's survival instincts compelled his body to fight, and the swift heel of one puckbuster sent Van Kleiss into the wall with a devastating crack. The odds he was still alive after Bobo's barrage was slim to none, and now he was all but guaranteed to be dead with his spine snapped and the orientation of his head flipped vertically. It was a gruesome sight Rex was wholly unfamiliar with, and the thought that he had essentially just murdered a man made his stomach feel infinitely worse than any number of talons or needles, causing his machine to fall apart at the seams. As Rex remained speechless on the chair, Bobo leapt to his side, and Beowulf sprinted past them to reach his master. And when Noah and Skelemander arrived, they were greeted to the harrowing scene of a typically vulgar chimpanzee consoling a distressed Rex and Beowulf, unmoving and unblinking, cradling the body of Van Kleiss in his arms. Intermission.